There is a Solution for That is sponsored by VARC Solutions. VARC Solutions helps small businesses succeed by delivering expert QuickBooks bookkeeping, consulting, quick-base development, and integrated solutions. If you own a small to medium-sized business that uses QuickBooks or QuickBase, the experts at VARC Solutions can help. In business since 1999, with people who care and the knowledge and experience to solve your toughest problems. Visit varcsolutions.com for all your QuickBooks needs. Welcome back to another edition of There's a Solution for That, where we help small businesses succeed by discussing challenging business problems and best-in-class solutions. All right, welcome everybody back to the There is a Solution for That podcast. So glad that you're back. Welcome back. And as for those of you that are regular listeners to this podcast know, we like to have a variety of topics. And today we've got a treat. We've got a very different and special topic. We have FT from Figured, and he's going to be talking to us about agricultural forecasting, financial management. And so it's going to be a fascinating conversation that I hope you're going to learn from. And also a lot of the concepts that we're going to talk about today can be applied to other industries, other businesses when it comes to finances and forecasting. But with no further ado, let me introduce FT from Figured.
Brad, thank you very much. What a pleasure to be here and with you guys and with the team here in Houston today.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love how you say Houston.
So I suppose for the listeners, I'm obviously not local, in case that wasn't abundantly clear. Actually, Figured's based down in New Zealand, and I'm based down there full time, which is why I sound like this.
I was going to say East Texas, but no, that's a little bit farther south.
It's like East Texas, just another 14-odd hours on an airplane.
Yeah, exactly.
So close, but not close.
So obviously, Figured may or may not be known by a lot of the folks that are listening. So just kind of tell us a little bit about Figured, and since this podcast is really about solutions to business problems, how did you get into this business, and what problem ultimately are you trying to solve?
Wow, okay, great. Let's start with that then, Brad. I guess Figured, we are the world's largest agri-financial management software provider. About 35,000+ farms around the world, New Zealand, Australia, US, Canada, Britain, Ireland, all over the place. They're all running their businesses across Figured. But I guess you go kind of, what does that really mean? Like ag financial management platform? Yeah, it sounds like a whole lot of interesting words. All we do really is we take all your production data and all your financial data, and we put it together in a single place. And that allows the whole farming team, the farmer, the accountant, the advisor, the banker, all of those people, to look at the farm in a different way and to really be able to understand what's going on there, and to have a different picture of it. And how we got started, it was a couple of farmers in New Zealand. We have back at home what we call a number 8 wire mentality, which basically just means if you don't have a thing, you just figure out a way to get it done. And that's where they started 10 years ago. And now we've expanded and we're all over the world, and now I'm here with you guys in Texas. So
Fantastic.
We've come some way.
Well, I've got to imagine that the agricultural industry has evolved tremendously over the last 30, 40 years for sure. There was a time when people, farms and ranches and the like, didn't have computers, they didn't have cell phones, they didn't have anything. And so obviously you guys are helping them evolve into this brave new world of technology and cloud and all that stuff. So how has that been? Like trying to help, farms as an example move into the cloud when maybe that's not their natural thing to think about.
That's a great question. I love that. I think, and just by way of background, I spent a lot of years in technology and technology publishing and those kind of things. And I think one of the things I learned a long time ago, and I still talk about now, is there's not really technology projects. They're just people projects at the heart of it. And I think when anyone approaches anything with this view that it's a technology project, it's not going to go that great because you're looking at it the wrong way around.
Right.
And I'd say, do we really help farmers adjust to new technology or, move to the cloud or anything? I'd say we kind of do, but I think that's an incidental. What we help farmers, and the whole farming team do is be closer to the numbers, be more in charge of the numbers, but have a better handle on things, And I think, in fact, I was talking with your team on a webinar this morning about this, Brad. We were talking about this and looking at what does agriculture look like at the moment, and it is, as you say, it's very different. There's a lot of things that are the same, but what's different now is we've kind of seen this confluence of rising input prices, falling commodity prices, higher interest rates, access to capital when you need it the most is getting harder and harder. And then we've got weather volatility on top of it. These 1 in 50 things are kind of happening every 5 or 10 years.
Right.
You put all those together, and that is a lot of change. And I think you could kind of sum that change up and say, look, it was true for a long time that you could go farming for love. For the love of it. People don't go farming for profit as the number one thing.
Right.
Although this year's survey from AgriWeb said maximising profitability is now the number one concern of farmers in the US.
I'm sure surviving probably as well, right?
Yeah, that's what maximising profitability is. But yes, staying afloat, And it is very different. And you kind of look at it and you go, well, look, that's what we're trying to help people navigate, is if we can give them something that enables them to continue to farm for love because the numbers are easy to be on top of and they're not in some esoteric accounting language.
Yep.
It's in farming language and it makes sense and it doesn't need interpreting. I think that's a big part of our job,
Yeah, no, that's really, really cool. In fact, I just thought of a phrase, you always hear about big pharma. I guess in the agricultural business, if you're maybe a mom and pop farm ranch in the agricultural business, you are in many ways competing with big farm. So I imagine, especially the larger, more enterprise type of farm operations they've already figured out a lot of these things and how to maximize everything, but your everyday, your farm, your ranch that's growing cattle and growing crops and having to literally weather the storms,
absolutely,
and compete with those big companies seems like that would be a massive challenge.
An enormous challenge, and it's really hard. And I think, it talks to what we were speaking about just moments ago. People don't go farming because they go, do you know what, Brad, I really love? I love spreadsheets. Where can I go and hang out with spreadsheets all the time? I'm going to go into farming.
Right.
They don't do that. They go farming because they love it, or it's in the family, and it's about freedom and all these wonderful things. That is why people have this great love for ag and why it's so important.
Yeah.
And so, when it is tough like this, it's super hard when you're smaller, because you can't have a full-time CFO and a CFO and all of these things going on, but you can have a better handle on those numbers. You can just look at them with confidence and go, I know where I am today, and if I need to go and speak to the bank, I know what I'm talking about, and they know that I know what I'm talking about. And that's the kind of thing that's traditionally been unbelievably difficult to do, And I think that's really what we're trying to solve for is, we've talked forever at Figured about how our job is powering the business of farming. And that doesn't mean the big businesses, that means everyone.
Right. Well, I love how you say that's, people get into farming and there's a love and a passion there, right?
Absolutely.
And we really say the same thing in our business. Nobody starts a business to do accounting.
No, exactly that. I couldn't agree more with you.
Unless you're an accounting firm, right? Unless you're a bookkeeping
apologies
firm.
to the accountants on the
right. It's like we love it. We really enjoy it, but
it's absolutely right.
But most people don't, right?
No.
Again, I just have to think about I'm trying to picture in my mind, a traditional farmer, in the quote unquote old days, which could be 10 years ago.
Yep.
And I imagine they probably can, look at their land and reasonably go, I think I know what's going on, but they could also be very, very wrong, right? And if they had a financial problem, they go down to the bank and they talk to Joe, their best buddy, and say, Joe,
Couldn't
I need,
be more true.
And I'm sure there's still places in the country where that still happens on a regular basis, but with banks, getting under, having more
regulation,
more regulation.
More hurdles.
If things are failing, suddenly, the Fed and all the other places start clamping down. So, so why now? It's like in terms of your solution at Figured and what it does, why now? Why is now the right time?
So I mean, I think you've touched on a lot of it there, actually, mate. I think I'm going to answer in a roundabout way, as I often do. I think my grandfather in New Zealand was a rural bank manager. His whole life he spent doing that. And I can remember he used to tell me stories. He'd go and hang out on the farm with people, and he'd help them farm, and he'd help them understand what to do. And he had total discretion over how much you'd loan and to who. And he'd tell stories about a guy came in, was a new farmer, and he wanted some money. And Grandad would tell me this, and he said, no, look, we said no. But I went out to his farm once a month, every month, to see how he was going and help him out with fencing and different things. Mm-hmm. And then we loaned him money. That discretion doesn't exist anymore. It's corporate banking. There's rules, there's Fed stuff, there's local rules. You just can't, as a bank manager or a rural bank manager, you don't have the ability to have that flexibility anymore. Right. And it's not that they're bad people. They're just rules exist. There's not much you can do about that. And so I suppose you look at that, and I know I touched on it earlier, and you say, well, look, when you're an ag business going to a bank, a couple of things happen. The first one is, from a lending perspective, you don't really fit the mold of how they assess risk. Your business is seasonal. It might be wetter, it might be hotter. Things change. Right. You make stuff out of nothing.
Right. You grow it.
It's hard to look at a standard accounting project and account for sunshine and rain. It just doesn't. It doesn't exist.
Yeah. If you're growing, growing beef, and cattle, right? It's
bigger.
Is that work in progress?
Exactly. And so it just doesn't fit with those things. And so you kind of look at that and you go, it is harder for banks to assess risk. They don't have a model that works well for ag, and they don't have that kind of discretion that they had before. And so you look at that from a figured perspective, or figured plus QBO, because the QBO part is absolutely critical, having those right numbers that are coming in. And you go, what we're really helping people with is answering the bank's questions. Let me put it better. They're really looking at someone and going, can you pay, and do you want to pay? That's really all it boils down to.
Right.
These 2,000-page bank submissions I've seen recently for a big multi-fund, 2,000-page submission.
That's insane.
That's really all they're trying to understand. And so we'd say, look, you're working with figured and QBO. Can you pay? You've got rock-solid numbers. You know where you are today, and the bank can see that. Tick.
Yep.
Do you want to pay? We had a rural manager at one of our events recently said to a room full of farmers, we want to support you. We just need to see you show up with a plan that you're managing, and ideally with your advisor. Right. It's not hard.
Right.
Again, 2,000-page document, you break it down, you go, that's all they're looking for. Do you want to pay? And so if you can turn up and say, look, I've got a plan. We monitor it every month. We get an update every month on how we're travelling, where we're up or down on numbers. You as the bank manager get the same update, and our farm advisor gets the same update. And we're all working on the same plan.
Yeah,
and
same team.
Yeah, the farming team is just working around one plan, one set of numbers. Because fundamentally it goes all the way back to that idea of production data, finance data, one place.
Got it.
And so the bank looks at that and goes, yes, you can pay. I can see that. Do you want to pay? Clearly you're demonstrating that. And across all our markets, we're seeing farmers get really significant points off loans when they're turning up.
Saving on interest, everything.
Oh, yep. But some of them really significant. I know New Zealand's a very small market, but just illustratively, our average farm is carrying between $4 and $5 million of debt down there as a function of being very dairy heavy, but that's a story for another day. And you look at what they're spending with the advisor or the CPA to prepare a really good plan and have 6 months of good, maybe it's just quarterly check-ins. It's not hugely expensive. They turn up at the bank and they're getting 50, 75 points we hear about on loans coming off numbers like that. That's a very, very easy decision to make about what are you doing next.
Yeah, on a multi-million-dollar loan, that'll pay for
so
itself.
Easy.
Yeah.
So easy.
Well, let's talk a little bit more about the software. And so like you mentioned, obviously there's Figured, right? And you mentioned it.
Yeah.
It works with and it's connected to QBO or QuickBooks Online, right? So
Yes.
so kind of like, in my mind, I'm trying to think, okay, well, where does QuickBooks end and Figured takes over? Like, where's the distinction and what is each side doing ultimately?
That's a great question. Now, look, I'm going to preface any answer I make at this point by saying I am not an accountant. Not in any way, shape, or form. Our discussion earlier, why did you get into these things? But really what it's about is saying, well, QuickBooks Online, QBO, is your source of truth. It's where all your transactions, all the in-out, that's where that's happening. And that's a general ledger product.
Right.
It works for everything. It's an amazing thing. We were, a slight tangent, we were at QuickBooks Connect last year, and one of the Intuit people was on stage with our CEO, and she said, Ashley Suter said of earlier, the reason we partner with Figured is because QuickBooks Online doesn't work for ag. And I'm paraphrasing, but that's essentially what it is. Because it doesn't, you don't bring in the production data and then you don't turn it into metrics, which are ag metrics. So that's what Figured does. And I think that's part of the beauty of it is there are globally a number of standalone pieces of ag financial management software. But I think the fundamental reason we're the biggest in the world and we continue to grow so fast and expand into markets, and I get to spend time in wonderful Texas now, which is amazing, is because it takes away all the double handling. Your stuff's done in QuickBooks Online, or any cloud accounting platform, to be perfectly frank, and it just comes into Figured, sorry. It comes into Figured. Quite a slip of the tongue there, apologies, Brad. It comes into Figured, and you know it's right. And you don't have to check it, you don't have to reconcile it against anything. It's just right. And it's there, and your production data is coming in on the other side. So that's kind of the start and finish of it.
Well,
does that answer that question a bit? Is it a non-accounting answer?
Yeah, it really does. So basically, whether you're using Xero as an accounting package or QuickBooks, you're in QuickBooks, you're writing checks, you're entering bills, you're paying bills, you may be doing payroll, you're doing normal accounting functions.
The things you have to do.
But it's when you need that industry specific type of input and output. QuickBooks by itself is not going to do it.
It just doesn't work for ag.
We talk to people all the time. QuickBooks, whether it's QuickBooks Desktop or QuickBooks Online, it is a general accounting package,
That's
right?
Exactly
it is
right.
not.
It's a phenomenally good general
very
package.
good. We run our business on it, right? But it's not built explicitly for any particular industry, and so the challenge is always, how do I get QuickBooks to work in my industry? Some industries are easier than others.
Sure,
if I'm a service-based business, I can do QuickBooks all day long and might not need anything out there.
That's right.
As soon as I need an inventory solution, now I've got a problem.
You've got to go outside.
And I've got to imagine just the uniqueness of ag is so specialized that you need some of that type of solution.
That's absolutely right, Brad. I think I always say to people who don't come from either ag or finance, and you're just explaining at dinner or whatever, what do you do? And they go, well, why does that exist?
Right.
And you go, well, think about it. Banks have the bank, and then they have an ag department. That's separate.
Right.
Why? Why do they have an ag department?
Yeah, because
it's
so
it
unique.
Doesn't fit the rest of everything else. So if a bank needs it, you're like, well, your financial software probably needs it as well.
No, that's fantastic.
It's an easy illustration, I think.
Well, let me do this because, again, one of the things I like to do, I really like to help our listeners, really get clear on like what's the real impact here. And, you talked about the problem of running an ag business and making it profitable. Maybe share a success story. Like maybe tell me a little bit, like an example of somebody who implemented the solution, obviously integrated with QuickBooks, but how does that ultimately in a real way impact them?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think, you kind of answer that by starting with quite a simple premise, Managing finances is stressful. It's hard. Nothing puts pressure on people. Either on a personal level, a human level, or a business level. There's nothing worse, really, than financial pressure.
Right.
And it's really hard. And a big part of financial pressure, I think, comes from that kind of uncertainty. Like I don't really know. Like I don't think it's good. I don't know how bad it is. And if I can't see it, and there's that kind of, and we've all seen it a million times, that slightly head in the sand that, oh God, I don't know where to start.
And you can't predict. Well, I mean, weather forecasters, right? They have a hard time predicting today, let alone a week or a month or a year out. And so I can imagine.
I thought it was supposed to be cold this week. I packed all my cold stuff coming from New Zealand. It was like, it's like 70-something degrees.
Exactly.
That's a point. But so there is that very, very human level, and I think that often gets overlooked. People talk about, what does it mean for the balance sheet or the valuation? You go, these are people, and they're under stress, and it's hard. And I think, that's a success. I'll tell you a story. We've got a an accounting partner of ours in New Zealand. They do a lot of great advisory work. And they had a farmer locally who, to tell a long story short, was very, very close to losing their business, and they'd done what so many do, which is just kind of put your head down, try and work your way out of it, try and do more hours, try to, and just not look at it and in the way that it needed to be. And they'd got to absolute crisis point. This was we're either going to be able to turn this around, find a way out very quickly, or we're gone. It's gone to the wall. There's going to be a bank sale.
Right.
That same farmer now runs a very, very successful farm in the South Island of New Zealand, and he runs it from South Africa.
Oh, wow.
I don't know, which is crazy. But using the technology that's available to him now, he's able to do that. But how's he got there? That very, very simple thing. By working with an advisor and having the right numbers to look at. And figured's not the answer. We're just the tool that the advisor used, and the guy had to come and ask for help.
Right.
But our role is to give them what they need to be able to do that and turn that business around. And I think, there's lots of stories. There's lots of more tactical stories I could talk to, Brad. There was one of our accountants. I was chatting with a partner recently using a benchmarking tool we have. And they had a farmer who was really, really worried about the amount they were spending this season on fert. Like their costs had gone through the roof. And they were looking at, they're spending a lot of their time as farmers trying to look at the system and what's going on and why are we doing so badly with fert this year? And just by being able to look across a dozen similar farms on figured in their area, they could say, actually, you guys are doing better than everyone's up.
Okay,
and it was a result of the weather and the sunshine, all the different things that had happened.
So some of that industry benchmarking.
Yeah. To be able to just see that and look at a few together and go, actually, your numbers aren't out. But without access to the numbers, of course, you can't you can't even start with that.
Right.
But for them as farmers, they go from really worrying about something, spending all their energy on something that wasn't actually a problem. They can farm better now and also feel better. They're not beating themselves up over it, and they're spending time on stuff that they can influence.
Right.
And it is going to help them have a better season.
Well, this is fascinating. So, this is really fascinating because, when I think of a solution like you guys have built and it's out there solving real problems with ag, one of the thoughts that comes to my mind is at the end of the day, how does that actually, in a real tangible way, impact how they farm?
Yeah.
So you're using the solution, right? But what does that do to me? If I was a farmer, how does that change my day to day? What do I do? What do I think about? Do I farm earlier? Do I farm longer? It's I don't know.
These are great questions, but I love this. So again, actually, we were talking with your team. We touched on this a wee bit on the webinar this morning. Because you're always trying to think about it. You have to talk about these things in practical terms. This isn't a hypothetical accounting tool. This is people who have their hands in the dirt every day.
Right.
It's got to do
literally,
a thing.
literally.
It's got to do a thing that solves a problem or makes a change. And I think I'd kind of probably talk to that more in terms of some other examples if I can. I'm thinking about some farmers we know, one of our customers, who were really struggling with staffing costs, finding it really, really hard with staffing costs, and they were always really disproportionate, and they were kind of just wrestling with it, going, what do we do? Do we need a farm manager? Do we need to replace the farm manager with just a hand and a general hand? And they just couldn't get it right, and it was costing them a whole heap of money, and just really in a difficult situation, because then you're talking about staff and you've got relation, it's a complex.
Right.
It's not
people.
a spreadsheet.
It's people
a people
again.
thing.
Yep.
We're back there again. And by sitting down with their advisor and looking at it in figured, and being able to use our scenario tool to look at different scenarios, it became really clear really quickly that their production and their size just simply wasn't quite enough. They needed staff, but they didn't have enough for an FTE, for a full-time employee of that type or that type or that type.
Right.
They'd been looking at a property down the road that had come up for sale, but they didn't think they had enough capital to get there, and they weren't sure what the impact of that would be. And actually, when you added that together with the problem they had, and you can put that into figured, you can do the scenario, we've spent that, we're doing this, and it's easy stuff to do with your advisor. They go, oh my God, we are so much better off by buying the property down the road, not just the increase in productivity and return on capital, but also in terms of the people problem with the staff. Suddenly those
Right.
FTEs make incredible sense.
Okay.
And your margins are going up, like everything's good. And it's just being able to, instead of doing it to your point earlier, I think, Brad, around gut and feeling, you've got to have that. And don't ever anyone take that out of ag. Like, please no one take that away. But when you can combine it with the numbers, and you can combine it with the facts and with your advisor, how much easier are those decisions to make, And that's really
Yeah.
life-changing for those people.
Right, and so it's like what you're speaking to is the business side of ag, which maybe is overlooked. Maybe I'm just thinking.
That's exactly right.
I'm thinking
That's
more
exactly
of
what it
like
is.
the specific crops that I'm growing. But but at the end of the day, it's a business, right? And you've got people.
It is.
And you've got to get people paid. And all those things. So
You do.
that's fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, so you've mentioned advisors a few times. So I'm just curious in terms of like your model. Are you direct to consumer, so to speak, direct to farm, or how do you work through advisors? Like, why is an advisor even a component in what you guys have?
It's a great question. I think I'll start that with everything, all of them. But I think, to the point I'm talking around advisors, I think when times are tough more than any other time in our lives, and this isn't an ag thing or a finance thing, it's just a human thing. When times are tough, that's when you need your people around you, And it's no different when you think about ag, being on the farm and the pressures that they're under, or financial pressure,
Yep.
You're always better off if you can get people around you. And, that concept of the farming team is one that's really, really important to us. Sure, you can do it on your own. But it's going to be easier if you don't have to. Like we talked about it earlier, you didn't go farming to be an accountant. We don't want you to be accountants. You don't want to be accountants.
Nobody does.
But no, apart from accountants. We do love accountants. But they don't want to be, and that's not really their role. We can give farmers the ability to have more confidence and make decisions and be involved as they want to. But we'd always encourage people, whether it's your farming consultant or your advisor who you have, or your CPA does advisory, or just helps around some of that financial stuff, eases some of that burden. Having that farming team, I think, is super important. But we do. We've got lots of clients who deal with us directly. We've got a network of figured partners around the world. We run a whole partner program for accounting firms.
Right.
In fact, I've just been visiting just up outside Fort Worth with one of our gold partners in Texas, actually.
Yep.
Which is an absolute pleasure, visiting a bunch of farming operations up there. And we work with advisors, and we have a lot to do with the banks as well, as you can imagine.
Right.
Less directly in most cases, normally, kind of as part of a team, but we do have some very interesting relationships with banks as well.
Well, that's awesome. And, it's like I think I maybe in business, I was probably slower to learn the lesson of relying on expertise, or
me too, Brad,
trusting in expertise and paying for expertise.
If I could tell 20-something-year-old me that you don't have to have all the answers, that actually the smart thing to do is get experts around you.
Right.
Jeez, that would have been an easier ride.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, I was slow to learn it, but I think I finally figured it out. And one of the things that I tell people all the time is my team makes my job super easy, and it's because of how competent they are. It's how capable they are.
Could not agree more with you.
Yeah, and the brains on top, the heads on top of the bodies, that are thinking and processing and doing really things
Absolutely.
to take care of our clients and things like that.
Yeah.
I'm gonna we're almost at the end of the podcast, but I want to throw you almost like a softball type of question.
Oh, that's very kind.
Because
it better be now.
It'll be good. Again, one of the things I have to sort of like beg the question, and it's like, why can't I just do all this in Excel? I've got to imagine there's lots of farms, owners of ag businesses, right? That their bread and butter is using Excel to try to do everything. So why not just keep using Excel? Like, what's the game changer for your solution compared to?
Of course.
Yeah.
I think it comes back to what we touched on before. Why does the bank have an ag department? Why does your bank have an ag department, but they don't have one for retail and they don't have one for manufacturing? Why do they do that? Mm-hmm. Because it's different and it's hard and it doesn't fit with anything else.
Right.
Excel wasn't built for ag. If you're a farmer and you're listening to this, I think the answer is probably this. When your combine breaks down, you don't take it to the garage that your wife's Honda car goes to. Do you know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
When the cattle are sick, you don't get the pet vet in.
Right.
You don't. Ag is different, and
It really is.
and everyone knows that. Whether you're an ag advisor, consultant, CPA, or a farmer, ag is different from everything else, and you do, and no one challenges that. And it needs the right tools. And you look around a farmer, the tools they have. A farmer doesn't have the same tools as I do on the boat, or I do at home.
Yeah.
They've got the tools they need, and
That's
we built
brilliant.
the tool that they need for the job. I think that's the real answer.
Wow, that is truly brilliant, and I'm not just saying that.
That's very generous of you.
Well, because every industry, they're right. They've got certain tools that they use.
You've got to have the thing you need.
If you're a roofing company, you've got to have the right roofing tools to put the roof on fast and efficient.
I have no
and
idea
right.
what those tools are, but I bet they have them.
Me neither. It's like I know they at least need a ladder of some sort.
That's right.
Very cool. Well, hey, this is FT. This has been a fantastic conversation. So, how does someone learn more about your solution? And obviously, if they are in the ag business and they're feeling like they want to go to that next level and really grow their business, how do they get a hold of you guys?
Really simple. It's either figured.com or now we're partnering with your wonderful team here, Brad. Get in touch with the team at VARC. Super easy. But just figured.com.
All right, fantastic. Well, hope everybody's enjoyed the podcast today, and obviously we'll put FT's contact information and the Figured contact information in the show notes. But hope you enjoyed this conversation, and FT, thanks for being on the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Brad. It's been a pleasure to be here with you.
All right, and for everybody else, we will see you next time. There is a Solution for That is produced by VARC Solutions. This episode was produced by Ashley White and Aaron Riley. You can subscribe to this podcast on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Watch the video version on youtube.com/There's a Solution for That. Or visit varcsolutions.com/podcast, where you'll find our entire podcast archive, as well as show notes, links to solution providers, and complete transcripts of every episode. If you love the podcast, please leave a review with your comments.